Well, Joyce isn't here, so I guess I'll have to sing this by myself, a cappella. I apologize to all in advance. Oh dear, we've a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The selectmen will work it all out. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The budget has been voted down. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Development has been denied. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The selectmen will work it all out. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The budget has been voted down. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. A development has been denied. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. We won't let that stop us now. We can't let that stop us now.
Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron on May 29th, 2008. It's a beautiful day out. A lot of people walking all over town, and I'm happy to be here. First thing I'm going to talk about today is the agenda, and I will have comments. This agenda is always pretty much in the same order. It's much like a selectman meeting. First I talk about comments, then I do notices, then I do the budget when there's something to talk about there, a planning and zoning update, the management triangle that I used to show before the election and after the election on the good way to run the town and the bad way to run the town. Possibilities for cost savings from my green paper to the Board of Education. Selectmen, June 2006. And suggestions on where to spend the development tax money from my June 2006 green paper to the Board of Education. Tonight is going to be a little bit Board of Education and education orientated. I'm going to be reading from a story. I'm going to tell you a proverb from my younger days. I have plenty here. Then I'm going to talk a lot about the school and the school budget from 2 years ago, 2006. You're going to be surprised when you see how familiar it is if I get that far. The song tonight took a little longer because I wanted to go through the whole song, and since then thought about another 20,000 verses for it. Maybe I'll do a little more for next week, but that's a little change in the song tonight. I would like to bring everybody up to speed because I get a lot of questions. One person told me this week I say I a lot. Well, I do say I a lot because I'm a consultant, and I'm here. This program is really a consultancy. So I like to talk about my experiences and apply them as I do all over the world in courses. I always talk about my own experiences to people. Then they don't take it personally, and they can draw inferences from that. I also say we a lot, and when I say we, I've talked about it on the program before. When I say we, I mean we the town. Not we a party or we a group at the lake. I mean we the town. So if you hear me say we, then you know I mean we the town. Next is, today I'm going to have as a special guest Mr. C. W. Clark Wesco, who at the time I was in University of Kansas was one of the chancellors there. I'm going to talk a bit about him and a lesson that he taught me, which is very appropriate for this program. The name of the first song, entry song, as I always tell people every few months, is "Oh Dear, What Can the Matter Be?" That's an old English ballad. It probably goes way back before that, but that's what we all knew it as children when we sang it. And then the last song at the end is John Brown's Body, later adapted to be the Battle Hymn of the Republic by change of one note. But I played John Brown's Body in honor of my great-grandfather, William McGrain, who was in the Civil War and is buried here in Winsted, lived here all his life. Okay, so for the comments, the first thing I want to say is I was walking on the street this week, and I saw a few Channel 8 trucks, and they were taking pictures. This was about 6:30 in the morning last week, and it was WTNH.com, and they were filming a program called Connecticut Quirks, Q-U-I-R-K-S, Connecticut Quirks. And that program is going to be shown on Channel 8. It's part of a series that they call Connecticut Quirks, and this particular one is going to be about Winchester and Winsted, the confusion between Winchester and Winsted. And they're going to try to explain that. The day before, they had been down in Winchester. The day I saw them, they were in Winsted in front of the town hall. I stopped, talked to them for a while, and they said, if you want to find anything out about this Connecticut Quirks program, you can look at, it's a series, but you can look at WTNH.com. They're going to do the same thing about other places in Connecticut that a similar sort of thing. A town, a borough, a town, you know, two different names, two different police departments, two different this, two different that, and they're finding that quite amusing, so they're putting it on. Now you're going to see a picture, or two pictures actually, over time here, of today's guest, who's W. Clark Wesco. He was the chancellor of the University of Kansas in 1960 to 1969. Dr. Wesco was a successful doctor, an educator, and a businessman. Here's a guy who was an educator and a businessman. He skillfully managed to enhance the quality of education while also diffusing explosive campus unrest and responding to the near doubling in enrollment, similar to the problems we have here. And this was the 60s when we had the problem with civil rights, and we had problems with the war, and the campus was in upheaval. He was the chancellor, and he did a very good job. This little thing I just read to you was taken from his funeral, the speech that somebody made at his funeral when he died in 2004. He was dean of the Kansas University School of Medicine at the age of 32. the youngest medical dean in the nation at the time, chancellor of the University of Kansas from 1960 to 1969, retired in 1985 as chairman of the board of Sterling Drug Company. He actually ran a drug company. Before that, he was vice president in charge of some of their medicines and things. But when he retired in 1985, he died in 2004, was chairman of the board of Sterling Drug Company. Now, I have to say that I learned a very, very good lesson from him when I was out in Kansas, and I think it would apply here. I think I was a junior at the time, and we were in the middle of the Cold War. The Cold War was really at its peak. And we wanted to have a thing called World Crisis Day on campus, and I was one of 2 or 3 people that was in charge of organizing that. The whole campus was going to stop for a day, invite speakers from all over the world to come and talk about the various crises in the world. And remember, we had a couple of our own at the time. John F. Kennedy was president. So we sent him a letter, and we said, or I think in that days it was a telex, and we sent him a telex, and we said, we're having a World Crisis Day, President Kennedy, we'd like you to send somebody out here to speak. And we got a letter back from somebody who was an underling who said, no, we don't have any time, we can't come out and speak. I'm just paraphrasing here. And so what I suggested to him was, well, I was the head of a political party at the time on campus, a very liberal political party. I'm more of a conservative in these days, but like a lot of the people in the early 60s are on Wall Street now, I'm here. So we decided to try to get somebody from Kennedy anyway. So what we did is we wrote to the Russian ambassador in the height of the Cold War, and we asked him to send somebody out to Kansas to speak. And he said, we will send Alexander Fomin. Now, Alexander Fomin, I didn't know anything about him, but our chancellor, Dr. Wesco, he knew a lot about him because he was briefed by the FBI and the CIA and everybody else about this guy's background. So out came Alexander Fomin. As soon as we sent another note to President Kennedy, I probably never saw either of these notes, but somebody answered and said, oh, you're having Fomin, Alexander Fomin out there. We'll get somebody out there immediately. So what they did is they sent Arthur Schlesinger, Jr., and they had a debate on the campus. There were a lot of notable people there. It was covered by the press all over America and TV all over the place. Alf Landon was on the stage. He ran for president, as you know, from Kansas, and some notable people were there. And Schlesinger debated Fomin. At the time, I thought he was a little rough on the guy. Today, I look back as, well, maybe he wasn't as rough as I thought he would be. But anyway, it caused a real stir around the country and around Kansas. So Dr. Wesco called me up into his office, and he said, Brian, what are you doing? And I said, we're having a World Crisis Day here. We had real good coverage. We had good day, and we had a lot of sub-meetings about various crises. There were probably 30 different seminars and symposiums on crises around the world. And he said, don't you understand? And I said, what do you mean, don't I understand? He said, I'm out trying to raise money for the university. Here's a chancellor of Kansas University, the highest person in the organization, spending almost all his time raising money for the university, so he could build more buildings and grow the university, and at the same time improve the quality of the whole school. So it was very, very touching in that respect. And then he said, oh, by the way, our past chancellor, he just called and he said, you're also goofing up the people-to-people program, which he started on the Kansas campus. He was a previous very well-known chancellor at UCLA at the time. So he really gave me heck because he said, you're really causing trouble for me raising money. Now, the reason I tell you this story is because when I talk to people in Winston that are involved in education, doesn't matter how they're involved, whether they're a teacher or a principal or a superintendent or a chairman of the Board of Education, with the exception of one that I knew before, not the present one, but the one before that, they don't like to get involved in what they call politics, raising money. Now, as I said before on this program, that's not politics, that's business. And now, I think over his term, I think it was in the statement there, he doubled the enrollment. When I went out to Kansas for a visit a few years ago with my wife, Joyce, we couldn't believe how big and how many new buildings they had. And his view was very simple. We can't live on what we get from the state and what we get from tuition. We must get money from elsewhere. And that's what he spent most of his time doing, and he didn't like me getting in the way. Later, when I applied to the Kansas University Law School, I was accepted, and one of the law professors said to me, "Brian, you almost didn't get in here." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because Dr. Wesco came by and tried to talk us out of accepting you." But of course, the law school wasn't about to let him talk them into micromanaging their school, so they accepted me, and then I didn't go in the end because I didn't want to go for 3 more years of college. I was starving and I had enough, so I went off and joined the computer industry. So anyway, that's that story. Now I have another story, which is one I'm going to show you a picture of and talk about. It's more what we knew when we were children. We all heard this story, and that's the little boy that cried wolf. Now, that's not the name of the story. There's a different name. I'll tell you that in a minute. But we know it as the boy who cried wolf. Now, I notice around town and around the lake and around everywhere around here that there's a lot of misinformation floating around. Almost everybody has the wrong story. And when people always stop me when they walk by my place on the lake and I'm down there and they ask me, "I heard this, I heard that, I heard this," turns out almost none of it is true. Almost none of it are the facts. Right? They're not lies. They're just, fabrications. Now, when I was in college, I went into a psychology class where they sat 30 people around in a circle, and then they had one person whisper in the ear of the next person, and then that person whisper in the ear, and it whispered in the ear of all the people around. And when it got back to the originator, it was a totally different story than the one that he whispered in the ear of the person to his right. So we have a lot of that going on now. There were people that went to meetings in the last few weeks, and I went to 1 or 2 of them, and I asked people, "Why are you here?" And they said, "Oh, my neighbor asked me to come." Well, do you know why you're here? Do you know what the problem is? "Oh, no, we didn't know that. Our neighbor asked us to come." Another guy says to me, "Oh, my wife always comes to this kind of thing, and I came along with her." Then there was another fellow there from Colorado or somewhere, and I asked him, and people didn't really know. They were there to support other people, but didn't really understand why. So tonight I'm going to read a few excerpts of this thing. I can't read the whole story, and you should see the picture of the boy and the wolf. This is a portion of The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf from Aesop's Fables. You probably read Aesop's Fables or heard about them or had them read to you when you were a child. So these are just excerpts. His master had told him to call for help should a wolf attack the flock. He was tending a flock of sheep. And the villagers would drive it away. If any wolf came, the villagers would drive it away. So now, though he had not seen anything that even looked like a wolf, he ran toward the village, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Wolf! Wolf!" As he expected, the villagers who heard the cry dropped their work and ran in great excitement to the pasture. But when they got there, they found the boy doubled up with laughter at the trick he had played on them. This happened again once or twice. Then one evening, as the sun was setting behind the forest and the shadows were creeping out over the pasture, a wolf really did spring from the underbrush and fall upon the sheep. In terror, the boy ran toward the village shouting, "Wolf! Wolf!" But though the villagers heard the cry, they did not run to help him as they had before. "He cannot fool us again," they said. The wolf killed a great many of the boy's sheep and then slipped away into the forest. That's from Aesop's Fables. If you want to read it, it's a little bit longer there, but not much. Now, what I want to say here is every Aesop fable had a moral to the story. The moral of this story is liars, and I just took this from the book. Not everybody's a liar here, that's for sure. A lot of it is misinformation that's being spread around, changed by the one person, given to another, changed again, given to another. And there's very, very poor facts around about almost everything, especially the development efforts. But the moral of the story, liars are not believed, even when they speak the truth. I spelled it wrong, but anyway, truth. Sometimes I go too fast when I type these up. So what we must always try to do, especially we scientists, is we must try to keep the truth at all times. And I always try to give out truth to everybody, and it takes me a long time to research it. I can't say I don't make a mistake from time to time, and I can't say I won't get things wrong from time to time, but we all got to practice dealing with facts, dealing with the truth. Just like Einstein would, or any great scientist, we need to do the same as human beings, because it's not good for it to have false information. Then I always have to correct this, and that takes me an hour or two sometimes. And to get to the point now where I just say, watch my program, because I already talked about that 10 times. I'll probably talk about 10 more. So that's that little fable for tonight. I hope you learned a lesson from it, and I hope there's some children watching from the Gilbert School so they can ask me questions if they have any. The next thing I'd like to say is, when we were kids, we were also told that all roads lead to Rome. Back in ancient Rome, all the roads led into Rome from around the whole area. And when we were kids, we always knew that all roads led to Rome. So there are many ways. There are many ways to solve the problem of the plan of conservation and development. We heard about that from some consultants this week. I missed the first one, but I was told about it, and I did see the second two. Some are difficult, and some are relatively simple. Let's take the shortest, quickest. By the way, to solve the problem of the POCD is getting adoption from the state, and there are some difficult ways to get it, long roads to Rome, and there are some relatively simple ways to get it, short roads to Rome. Let's take the shortest, quickest, least expensive way to Rome, the POCD adoption, and do the rest in bites over the next few years. We have to have this thing at least adopted, and maybe even a little more than that, by the year 2010. We're late doing it. We haven't been doing it. The next thing I want to show you is the old triangle, and that's the triangle I put up before and after the election. I want to put it up again, and I only have a rough drawing here because I couldn't find my beautiful drawing that I have, and I hope you can see that. But basically, this, and I think I have a better drawing here. Here it is. It's not much better, but it's better. This is the two triangles that I drew. This is the proper way to do things. This is the improper way to do things. Any project, run any town, run any business, any program that's 10 years long, what you want to do is you want to work down the slope. And the way you do that on a triangle is you deal with the most difficult problems, planning problems, and difficult problems up front. And then each problem as you go along should be less and less and less until you get to the end. You still might have to do a little rework along the way. You usually do that under what we call change control. Now, the worst way to do it, and the way we've always done it in the past up until this administration, as far as I know, I've been around here the last four to 8 years, is this way. So what we did is we didn't do enough work here, and then by the time we got up here, we had to circle around, circle around, circle around, and now we're in this big pickle we're in because we've been circling around all these years, and we haven't got ahead. So what I want to say to you is a very, very important thing, and that's why you hear now these selectmen are taking some very strong moves from solving some very difficult problems with some very difficult decisions. From what I'm told when I do talk to them or the town manager, they do their homework. They do have good reasons for it, and there's a lot more information available than perhaps anybody's hearing right now. It should all come out in the long run, but with possibilities of lawsuits and all, it has to be a little done very carefully. So this is the way we're going now, and we can get there. If we went this way, we'd never get there. We'd be looping around forever. So I wanted to remind you of that. That's why we're making these tough decisions now. The decisions should get easier as you go down this. I think once we're breaking even or even profitable, there will be way down in here somewhere. But that's going to take at least 5 years, maybe more, now that we've just denied another large opportunity. Okay, the next thing I'd like to show you quickly is there is a nice brochure of Winsted. When we had the summit meeting, they said we really want to get good news about Winsted. I think Fred Newman put this together with a couple of the organizations in town and some grant money. And it's a nice brochure, and I got it from Tony Canavo. He's got a whole lot of history there. I don't know how new this is or old. I haven't had a chance to talk to Fred about it. But check at the town hall in the town clerk's office or at Friends of Main Street or somewhere like that. Maybe Economic Development Commission, if you want to try to get a copy of that. If not, let me know and I'll make you a copy of this. That's for selling the town. This is something that was in one of the local papers, the Torrington Register. Every town has a green. And it's got all, for all summer, what's happening all over the area, Litchfield County and other places, in Winston too, what's happening over the summer, all the events and all that kind of thing. So that's a very, very good thing. You might want to pick it up and get a copy of it. The next thing I want to say to you, that's the good thing the Register's doing now. They're putting that out. I think it was already out. You might be able to get one from them. There's a bad thing they're doing too, I think, and that is they've got in their paper now a graffiti space, which I call it. It's on the editorial page. And anybody can write a comment to this graffiti space. It's not called graffiti. I call it graffiti. They can write a comment there and get it printed. And I did talk to the, you don't have to sign your name. That's why I call it graffiti. I prefer to see people sign their name and take responsibility for what they write. And if they don't sign their name, to me, that's graffiti. You might as well write it on the bathroom walls, is put it in the graffiti space. He did say there is some editorial control over that, not a heck of a lot. I mean, they can't slander people or anything like that. But it looks to me like it isn't too far off from that. So I don't really like that. I just wanted to make a point here of that, and I did say that, I'm pretty sure, too, when I saw the fella. Okay, now I'm going to talk, just to prove I'm not a one-trick pony here, I'm going to talk about the letter I wrote to the Board of Education in June of 2006. Last week, I think it was, I read, I'm pretty sure it was last week, I can't remember, either that or the week before, I read you the green paper that I sent to the selectmen, in which I referenced the fact that I did go 3 times to the Board of Education with my green papers, and I want to read you a little bit about one of the things that was in the papers and sent. It's a timely now because of the budget getting turned down, denied, and the fact that we've got to redo the budget. And the redoing of the budget, I will guarantee you, we will not add any money to the education budget. We will not add any money to the town budget. It will not produce more revenue. So it's probably going to be some serious cost cutting. I have no idea what that will be, but it's got to be quite a bit, I think, to get past this referendum in the second pass. If not, it'll have to go back again. So you'll be hearing more probably at the next week sometime, or maybe even towards the end of this week, if they have an emergency selectment meeting, or next week at the real selectment meeting, or next week at a special selectment meeting, sometime you'll be hearing about that. I'm hoping to be able to say something on my next week's program about that. But anyway, here's what I told them, and I'm going to read it kind of verbatim. To create, dear Board of Education, this went to all the Board of Education members at the time, and it was also the new chairman of the Board of Education was there. The previous one was a big supporter of trying to get more money into town for the schools. She was the Clark Wesco of Winston at the time. She's no longer the chairman of the Board of Education. But saving costs. To create a plan with milestones that will keep you afloat until help arrives from a dramatic increase in the town's revenue and or a large decrease in the town's spending, or some combination of both. I ask you to go to the town manager and ask him to help you prepare a joint plan with milestones that will save you and the town money annually, eventually, by overlapping costs, by combining services, such as sharing personnel, comma, sharing computer services, comma, and whatever else you think of with the town and Gilbert over the intermediate to long run. I want to point out here, as a digression from reading, but these are all ideas. They're not my ideas, as I said once before on here. They're from the other leaders in the town, from the Taxpayers Association, the Independent Party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and John Gauger when he was on TV in the early days. A lot of these things were all mentioned by them. So if they hadn't been, I would have mentioned them anyway, because they're kind of standard practice when you're trying to cut budgets and manage money. So number 2, also approach the town manager and ask him to help you form a very small task force. Now, I say small, 2 to 3 people, because the last administration liked 12 to 15 people, and businessmen don't like 12 to 15 people. They like 2 to 3, 1 if possible, 2 to 3, maybe 5 at the most, okay? People to prepare a plan with milestones to reduce the health and other personnel expenses in a less costly arrangement. as contracts are renegotiated over the years. Number 3, review your entire budget with your financial director. At the time they had a consultant there, but I changed it for this program to director because they now have a financial director and have had for a year or two. And produce a plan with milestones to include the implementation of all possible cost savings that may result from using outside services instead of in-house resources, once negotiated and agreed where practical. So what you do is you try number 1 to eliminate any redundancy you can. That was point number 1. Point number 2 is where you can't reduce redundancy, try to see if you can find outside people to do it by competitive bid that might be able to do certain functions cheaper than you can do them in-house. That's another standard practice. The next one is ask the town manager for help in preparing a plan with milestones with Gilbert for sharing as much as practicable between the town and Gilbert. Try to include any resolutions in the new contract. These 3 groups should be a happy family: the town, Gilbert, and the board, the K through 8. That's all. Should be one happy family. We have a little problem here in that Gilbert's a private school, so we have to use different procedures and different techniques for dealing with them. But in the end, I would say the 3 leaders need to sit in a room with a cigar and maybe a Diet Coke once a month and talk about these things and see if they can come up with some plans to do things better. Now, I do know that this was written 2 years ago, and you'll see later when I talk about the rest of this program that a lot of progress has been made. People are talking to each other. But if you go ask for a plan from the town manager, which I haven't done with this town manager yet, but if you go ask for a plan that incorporates all 3 working together towards one common end, and that's efficiency and cost savings, you're not going to find one. It's going to be little pieces here and there, and as you know, I think right now they're in arbitration. I saw people coming out of the town hall yesterday, and I asked people, what are all these educators doing here? And they said, oh, there's arbitration going on between Gilbert and the K through 8 and the Board of Education. So we shouldn't need that. We should have a plan, and we should try to do whatever we can. Now, I want to say that to include any resolutions in a new contract, these 3 groups should be a happy family and always work together as a team. Each one trying to do the best for all. Now remember, I wrote this in 2006 when there were a lot of problems in this area, still are to this day. Trying to do the best for all. Proactively seek, next point is proactively seek sponsors and volunteers to pick up or share costs. For example, sporting equipment, they probably do some of this already, coaching duties, maybe they can go to Howmet and say, can you take care of all our, can you donate all our sporting things? Can they go to somebody else and say, can you help us with our travel costs for the teams, wherever they are allowed. So sporting equipment, coaching duties, travel costs, etc., wherever they are allowed by agreement with personnel. Obviously, you can't bring people in to do things if there's already union agreements that say that nobody else can come in and do things. So first you'd have to resolve that problem, and then you could try to do this. So we have to respect any agreement. You know, we're honest people. We respect agreements we make with others, and normally in business it's a handshake. And then you do the contract, and as I told you once before, Phil Fellows told me, once the contract's done, put it in the bottom drawer and work together to get the job done. When the job's done, bring out the contract and see what you have to do to resolve any issues that came up along the way. But don't be bringing out the contract every day. That's like pulling up the plant to see if the roots are still growing every day. That won't help grow the plant. Number 6, unless otherwise prohibited, try to build a war chest from contributions from alums, benefactors, etc. Now, when I look at other towns, you can usually name 4 or 5 people that really did well, like the settlers and the early people in our area. We had a lot of people donate a lot of things to this town, and not just Gilbert, but there were a lot of industrialists who really helped this town by donating things and helping all the people. So we need to find out who graduated from these schools over the last 50, 100 years, and are they in a position to help us now? And if they are, please try to accept the help. Don't nitpick them and say, we don't like your politics or we don't like the way you wrote your last book or anything like that. Just try to work with them, absolute value of, and get them to help us with raising money for things. Now, I know Gilbert does some of this already. I see things where they have all kinds of fundraising events for themselves. We got a big sign on the door, recording going on. Still, we got somebody banging on the door. I mean, it's unbelievable here sometimes. Number 7, continue to chase grants. When I first came here, everybody was grant happy. They still are. I mean, we get a lot of money from grants, and I don't want to belittle grants, but I don't think that we can rely on them as much as we do now, because we're going to be heading for a fall. As you know, this year we're getting a little less money from the state than we did, and that's part of our problem with this budget, but not the whole problem, but part of it. But don't rely on the grants until you have them in hand. You can know they're coming, but you got to be very careful, because you can work forever on a grant and then not get it. And in the meantime, you haven't done anything else. So you've got to have a fallback plan. If this grant doesn't come in, what can we do? For planning purposes, assume that they're not going to be granted. So that if they do come in, you're really doing well. If they don't come in, you're not stuck and lost 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now, I'm not naive. This is part of the letter. I know achieving any of these plans can take a long time, because there is a lot to consider and resolve. So we're talking about plans here that might take 5 years, might take 10 years. But if you don't work on them 1 year at a time, like redoing the center of town here in Winston, then they'll never get done. There's no Santa Claus going to come in here and just drop the whole bundle on us. So we're going to have to go out and earn everything. So state statutes and some things by charter may prohibit, and some unions agreements changes will take a long time if granted at all. Okay, now, where did I go? Sometimes when I turn the page. Anyway, you must get, the other thing you must do is next and very important will be the education of the public. And I've told this many times to everybody I see. Public continuously, so they will understand and vote in your favor or closer to it consistently like anyone else. You must earn their trust. You must earn their trust. People are not going to give you the trust. Remember, trust but verify I talked about in the earlier stages of techniques to use when you're running a business. You trust people and then you check on them. You trust people and then you check on them. You trust people, then you check on them. If they prove to be trustworthy, you don't have to check on them anymore. You trust, and they can go anywhere in the world, and you know you're going to be in harmony and sync with the decisions they make. But if you trust them and they don't follow through, and you trust them and they don't follow through, and you trust them and they don't do what they said they were going to do, then you don't trust them anymore. So yeah, that's called trust but verify. And once you do trust and you prove people's trust, it lasts a lifetime, because normally they're the kind of people who you can keep your trust. So you must get directly to the voters with a concrete objective, factual information, and you can't duck the issues. When I first came here, we always had tears here from the educators when please approve the budget. I beg you to approve the budget. I beseech you to approve the budget. Well, that isn't good enough. There's got to be factual information done in a business-like manner, and then we got to look at all, because all they're going to come back and say, well, while you're beseeching and while you're pleading, what are you doing to cut the costs? That's what they're going to say to you. So let's do that. Now, I must admit, there's been less of that in the last couple of years, and everybody appreciates that. It's much more business-like, and it's getting better, but it still has a long way to go. You may be doing things, great things, in all this area, but if no one, the voters, know about it, you are leaving a lot to chance. And you don't want to leave anything to chance. You can't afford to leave it to chance. Good business people, and I do think that the Board of Education should be run by a business person. That's my view, because we've got a lot of educators that could help. But what we really need, we have business problems with the schools. And I really feel strongly about that after looking at them for 5 or 6 years here and watching things on TV and everything. Same in other towns. We're not much different. So you don't want to leave anything to chance. When we went to the moon, we didn't leave much to chance, and we still had problems. But you try not to leave things to chance. And then to know when things will be under control, and that money is spent wisely. People want to know that. They often say, these selectmen are not spending our money wisely. They're not watching out for our interests. That's part of the reason I think these last group got elected, because people wanted them to look better after. Now, they made a good attempt at a responsible budget. They got a 14% one from their last interim town manager, which he thought would, and his people thought would really run the town much more reasonably. That now it's just, then they cut it to 7%, and now it's probably going to cut in half again or so. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you know, it's going to be some services cut. So people want to know what you're doing. They want to know it all the time, not just at budget time. And I know that the superintendent of schools over at K-8 is trying to pass out more information and what he calls town meetings and things, but I think they just happen mainly at budget time. There should be a monthly one where key leaders like the Taxpayer Association, the heads of the parties and all, they should be briefed on how are we doing for next year's budget. That's what they should know all the time. So, and what preparation are you doing for next year's budget? Okay, you, the Board of Education, need to prepare a list of the 5 most controversial financial issues, state them clearly, and give a time scale for their resolution and report progress against their resolution periodically. Usually quarterly should be enough, but monthly is better, but quarterly will probably be enough. Now I'm going to move to another paper, the actual letter I wrote to in 2006 to the Board of Education. Again, I've taken some excerpts from it. I didn't want to read the whole letter because I wouldn't be able to fit it into this program. But anyway, here it goes. This is going to give you an idea of what I think they can do. The school board continuously pleads at budget time, what about the children? This paper is a result of a year-long effort on my, I got a thing here to put up. Sorry about that. This paper is the result of a year-long effort on my part and is my positive contribution to our plight. I do not belong to any political party and have nothing to gain except any benefit that all other citizens gain from the additional revenue that may result from the Aurora Rosa development should it be approved. Now, the first big project, 456 and homes and a golf course and all that was approved after I wrote this letter. So that has been approved. It is now waiting for approval from the state and the Army Corps of Engineers and the DEP in the state. So that's happened since this letter. The second project was recently just failed this week. So I wouldn't say it's the end of the game. They failed twice already. They'll probably be back for a third time sooner or later. Should the Aurora Rosa development now before the land use boards for acceptance be approved, I am asking the Town of Winchester Board of Education to unanimously send a request to the selectmen and town manager asking them to create a new budget line item and associated sinking fund. Remember, I defined sinking fund a couple weeks ago for you. In future annual town budgets entitled, say, you can name it anything you want, I'm just saying, call it the Winchester School System Maintenance and Development Plan. Into this sinking fund, place each year, say 10% of the tax money generated by the development effort for a given number of years, say 20 years. And any revenue generated by the sale of water to the city of Torrington as a result of the developer's extension of the water line to the town line. Let me just say here, it's not in this letter, but the developer, when he does get all his permits and begins to develop, as soon as the economy's a little better probably, or maybe even right away, he is going to, at his expense, run the water and sewer line down from roughly the town garage, down the old Route 8 corridor to the Torrington town line. And at the time, we were told by people on the Water and Sewer Commission, and they came to meetings, and they talked very positively about these projects, and were in favor of them at the time. And they said that maybe if we get a water line down to Torrington, there may be the possibility in the future to sell water from our abundant supply, if we still have an abundant supply after the development's done and all, to the city of Torrington. So that would be revenue that we get in without having to run the line and the sewer all the way down there ourselves. The developer would pay for that. So what I said is, if we get, as a result of the developer's extension of the water line to the town line each year at peak, not allowing for inflation, this will be about $250,000 to $300,000 to go into this sinking fund, and that's just a guesstimate based upon numbers that were given to us by the developer and other numbers that we have in town. And this is recurring money. It doesn't include permits, like hooking up to a house, $1,000, hooking the sewer up to the house, $1,000, hooking the water up to a house, $1,000, and then a permit to build each house. So that's millions of dollars we're talking about there, and I'm saying take 10% of that, which you can, and put it in here. Since writing the letters, I found out that we have two kind of profit centers in town. We have one for the water and sewer side of the house, and we have one for the rest of the town. So, so it isn't quite as clear as I said in the beginning, but that all can be worked through. One way or another, the town will get the money. It'll be in the town. Whether or not it can all get to the school or not, it's another story. So then I say per year, $250,000 to $300,000 for the fund per year. This money, once accumulated, can be used to help fund, under Town of Winchester direction, capital expenditure improvements at the Winsted schools. Now, doesn't that sound kind of familiar to you? That's kind of what we wanted to do with the bond issue. And my whole view here in this letter, which was written before the bond issue was written, was let's earn and then spend. And that's what the current administration, at least the 5 businessmen, are trying to do, as you can see if you watch their meetings. A few examples where the money can be spent over the years are, now you'll really notice these, because now we're getting into some of the OCR stuff. This was 2 years ago before I even knew about the OCR stuff. By the way, I got most of this input for this from the last chairman of the Board of Education. She was very, Kathy O'Brien, she was very helpful, very cooperative, went to a lot of the meetings, and when I called her to say, what do you think we could use money for, she read these off to me. So they're not mine, they come from, right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, right from the chairman's mouth, so to speak. Number 1, alarm systems for all the schools. Thousands of dollars in computers and other school equipment in the schools are vulnerable to theft. Number 2, repairs and upgrades to all of the school lavatories to meet ADA and other standards. That's what we're working on now with the school building committee. We're not getting the funding from the developments because developments aren't here. If one of the developments was here, we'd be getting the money from them probably, or we could arrange that through the town manager, so that some of the money got diverted, as I suggested, to do this kind of work. And remember, all we need is enough to meet our obligation, and then the other percent, 60, 65, or whatever it is today, will come from the state for that, those programs that are eligible for that. Number 3, carpet replacement in Pearson schools, media center, and office. Number 4, ongoing upgrading of doors and entranceways to meet the requirements of the ADA. That's part of what we're doing with the OCR stuff, starting at Pearson. We also did a little work, I think not much, but a little work at the senior center there too. Number 5, improvements to the alternate high school program. I wanted to put some money into that. I don't know exactly what for, but that's the place where they can spend money if somebody gives it to them. Number 6, replacement and maintain the oil tanks. That's this big hullabaloo we know over the last 2 years with the Pearson oil tank. And where we were going to get fined $20,000 something, we finally Bruce Gressick negotiated us out of that. Now we got to fix the feeder lines to the oil tanks at the other two schools, and that's was up to now is in this year's budget. I'm pretty sure it's going to remain in there, although I don't know. I have no inside information. I try to work as much as possible from public information that I get from the town hall and from things I read in the newspaper, although when I read things in the newspaper, I have to be very careful because they're not always as factual as they perhaps should be. So I have to be careful with those. The next one is, they're pretty factual, but you know, you can always improve on that. Next one is replace or upgrade kitchen. Kitchen was a big deal 2.5 years ago, and other facilities when necessary. So what we would say is we'd have this money coming in every year forever, and if we kept putting money aside into this sinking fund for the schools and the capital items, sinking funds are for capital items, if you remember from last couple weeks ago, so it amounts up. If you don't spend it this year, you can move it over to next year, and you can put another 350 in, or 300, or 200, or whatever. And then the next year you can put more in, and finally when it gets to $1 million, you can do something with it, or you can do something with it when if you need 100,000, or 200,000, or 300,000. So that's what the purpose of a sinking fund. Since I've got a few minutes, I'll tell you, not all the selectmen when I presented these papers or the Board of Education, they always look for what's wrong with these things. They never look for how can they do it. So positive people look for ways to do things, not ways not to do things. So what we need here is to remember that what people don't like sometimes sinking funds, because once they put the money in for that purpose, they have to use it for that purpose. They can't switch it willy-nilly, ad hocly, onto some other higher emergency problem, right? Without the permission of the town meeting and a referendum if it's over $15,000. So you have to be very careful about that. So people try to avoid sinking funds. I say good businessmen do not try to avoid them. They try to use them as a convenience and a way to get things done and a way to keep things going in perpetuity. Remember Mr. Batchelor, we still got a 100-year-old sinking fund that he started in the early 1900s, and it's got probably 50, 60,000 in it right now. So that's that for that. Now, I'm also going to say here in the letter, forgot to put the last one up. I get so excited about this stuff. You know, none of this is old. This is all the same old stuff. It's been going on for many, many, many years before I've been around here. But, okay, number 5, improvements to the alternate high school program. Replace the oil tanks. We already did that one. So the next one is Winchester budgets each year. So it's also please request new line items. Remember last time I talked about there's sinking funds for capital issues, line items are for expense issues in budgets. And so go ahead and please request a new line item to be placed in future town of Winchester budgets each year for a period of, say, 5 years. They can go on forever. It doesn't have to be just 5 years. Entitled, say, Aurora tax income to be used for the benefit of the Winston School System Catch-Up Plan. Into this line item, ask for another 10% of the tax money generated by this development effort. This money can be used to help fund, under the town of Winchester direction, because it's their money, under the town of Winchester direction, non-capital expenditure improvements at the Winston schools. For example, new school teachers, right? More school teachers, higher pay for school teachers, whatever they think they need to get the job done and to get the test scores up. This money can be used for capital, non-capital expenses required to upgrade the school system where necessary. Since this cannot be a sinking fund, the monies cannot be carried over from year to year. I have since found out that you can carry these money over from year to year by talking to the finance director. He'll show you how to do that. These are intended to be monies in addition to the normal non-Aurora estates tax budgeted. So you're going to have, this is money in addition to what you would normally put from your regular budget. Also, this money that comes from any development efforts releases pressure on the normal budget because it's paying for a lot of work that either wouldn't be done at all or is being done in the normal budget. So perhaps you can use some of this money to help Gilbert if necessary. Wouldn't that be nice? We get instead of arguing with Gilbert, we'd be in there working with them and trying to share this money with them and try to make sure our total system, K through 12, is all sound and good grades and nobody arguing and getting enough funding and all that. It won't happen overnight. It's going to take up to 5-10 years to get it, but if you don't start now, it'll take 15 or 20 years or 20 or 30 years. So there's nobody, there's not going to be a check from a rich uncle that's going to come in and solve all our problems. I don't think we'll see another Gilbert for quite a while. A few examples in this budget category are fund additional personnel. They're always saying they need more teachers. They need more special things. They need specially this, specially that, and I'm sure they do need it. I have no argument about that. My approach is let's get the money so they can get it. Next is to fund foreign language programs. At that time, 2 years ago, that was a big thing. Still to this day, they want another Spanish teacher. I think in those days they wanted one Spanish teacher. Now they want 2 Spanish teachers, I think. And next is foreign, and then the last thing was big at the time I did the letter was fund the Annie-type productions. At the time, they were doing an Annie-type production. And all the kids were going to put on a play, I think at Pearson, called Annie. So I say, well, we could fund that kind of thing. Anything to do with that goes for all arts and all sports. You know, as you know, every year when we say we're going to have to cut the budget, first thing they say is, okay, all the computers go, okay, all the sports stops, okay, we've got to get the band assembled, we got to not have any of that stuff. So, you know, that's the first thing they always say. And then they get around to, well, then we can't have language teachers, and then they get around to some of else. Meanwhile, our test scores are not the best for attracting businesses into town where people are young professionals and they want their children to be in a school that has the right accreditation. Okay, now I'm not knocking the schools. What I'm saying is let's try to help them. Let's get these developments in. Let's get them the money. And you heard from me now something I told the Board of Education 2 years ago. I've had no response at all from anybody in that time frame. Okay, so I want to say I have talked a few times with the superintendent of schools, and he seems to understand. But kind of their basic attitude, as I said a few times, is, well, we shouldn't get involved in politics. We don't want to get involved in that thing. Clark Wesco must be turning over in his grave when he hears that kind of thing. With that, thank you very much. See you next week when the new baby's coming. I'll have this program recorded in advance. Thank you very much. It's a select meeting on Monday. It's past my bedtime.
Hello, everyone. At election time in November, we knew that there were serious problems with the town business that would take many years to resolve. These were mainly revenue problems. We also knew that we needed a majority of successful businessmen on our Board of Selectmen to help us resolve these serious problems. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. The selectmen will keep their resolve. They'll stick to business and help us all out. They'll stick to business and help us all out. They'll stick to business and help us all out. by keeping their promises now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. The budget has once been denied. We'll all have to tighten our belts for the future. We'll all have to tighten our belts for the future. We'll all have to tighten our belts for the future, as spending is less than some need. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. A chance for more revenue has just been denied. Let's keep our resolve and help raise the revenue. Keep our resolve and help raise the revenue. Keep our resolve and help raise the revenue. Let's back these businessmen now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. The selectmen will keep their resolve. They'll stick to business and help us all out. They'll stick to business and help us all out. They'll stick to business and help us all out by keeping their promises now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. Oh dear, we're having those problems now. The budget has been denied. We'll all have to tighten our belts for the... Well, Joyce isn't here, so I guess I'll have to sing this by myself, a cappella. I apologize to all in advance. Oh dear, we've a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The selectmen will work it all out. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The budget has been voted down. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. A development has been denied. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The selectmen will work it all out. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. The budget has been voted down. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. A development has been denied. Oh dear, we have a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. Oh dear, a couple of problems now. We won't let that stop us now. We can't let that stop us now.